The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the murder of nursing student Laken Riley, who was attacked one morning while going for a run on campus. Now, this story struck a lot of nerves with Americans because of who Laken is and who her alleged killer is. Here's the story. Laken Riley was a 22-year-old nursing student at Augusta University in Athens, Georgia. Laken had recently transferred from the neighboring University of Georgia because she wanted to be a nurse. Laken was also a runner. She competed in cross country in high school and continued running recreationally in college. On February 22nd, she decided to take a morning run. She headed over to the running paths near the intramural fields in Lake Herrick on the UGA campus. When she did not return from her morning run, her roommate called police. Laken's body was found less than an hour later near Lake Herrick. The initial investigation revealed she died from blunt force trauma and her skull was disfigured. Investigators worked quickly and identified a suspect through surveillance video, which showed a suspect wearing a very specific hat. The next day, they located a man fitting the description who was wearing the hat. That suspect, Diego Ibarra, was detained for having a fake green card, but not implicated in Laken's abduction and murder. Instead, investigators arrested his brother, Jose Ibarra, who also entered the country illegally, and have charged him with the murder of Laken Riley. She was just going for a run. That's all she was doing. And you think about Laken Riley, like if that's your daughter, you are so proud of her. Doing everything, like studying to be a nurse, and we need nurses in this country. And to dedicate your life to helping others, like that's amazing. It's really amazing. But that life was taken. And what I wanted to do, Cody Thomas, our producer, on the case and went to the University of Georgia to take a look around where Laken's body was found.
Now we're here on UGA, beginning on their East Campus. Here at this apartment complex, this is where Jose Ibarra, the alleged killer of Laken Riley, and his brother Diego lived, both who are now in custody. And what I'm standing on right now is that popular cut-through. We've talked to some students since we've been out here. A popular cut-through down to the intramural fields. This paved path that they use as a shortcut to get down to the paths that circulate Lake Herrick. As we continue walking down, we've only seen a few, 2, maybe 3 runners come by, some people walking their dogs. But one thing to note when we get down here on this paved pathway, to my left right here, that's student housing. As you can see, there's a UGA bus right here, a campus bus dropping off kids, picking up kids. Security cameras, if you look closer. These are the only sets of security cameras we've seen since we've been here so far, which means if you're out of that range, you're generally out here on your own. No matter if you have your location on your phone, no matter if people know where you are, that's the only range of security camera footage that they have, that we've seen thus far. As we continue on down, this pathway that Laken Riley took, you see we have a biker coming, somebody down there walking their dog. As we continue down, if you look this way towards the woods, that's where the paths and the wooded trails begin, here at the intramural fields around Lake Herrick. And if you look closer, you can see that is the path that she took on her final run that morning in February. Now, we've just come down that path, down from Jose Ibarra's apartments up toward the street. And as we stand here, one thing to note, there's no fence, there's no barrier, there's no wall between those apartments and these trails that lead to the intramural fields, which means anybody from the street can access these trails. As we come across this railroad track, we come down these stairs, coming down this popular cut-through that students use to get to the trails around Lake Herrick. You can see on either side of me, the brush is very thick, it's a little shaded, and it's a little secluded. Ample opportunity for somebody to hide. Now, we get on down the trail a little bit more, and we see that it diverges off in 3 different directions. Now, as we were walking out here a little bit before, we saw one, maybe two runners going from this direction down to that direction, which led us to believe this is the path that Laken Riley took down to the pond. And again, as we continue down this trail, very secluded, lots of woods, lots of brush, very dense brush. It would be hard to imagine somebody crawling in there and trying to catch somebody by the element of surprise, but we never know until more information comes out. Now we continue down. It's a little rough, a little edgy down here. Maybe one or two runners we saw before, but this is the trail that people walk their dogs on, students jog on, that lead down to the pond here on Lake Herrick. So we just left that long stretch of land around the trail over there, maybe a quarter mile long, little less than that. Somewhere along this path is where Laken Riley was brutally attacked by Jose Ibarra. His apartments are right up there. Now, as I come around this corner and get to this spot right here, it starts to look pretty open. You know, there's trees, there's brush, but as I pan from left to right, it seems as if you would be able to see if somebody was out of place, if something was out of the ordinary. Now, something to note, this is supposedly supposed to be a popular trail by students to run here, but we've been here maybe an hour and a half now. We've only seen 3, 4, maybe 5 people tops. And one last thing to note, there's no security cameras. There's a light post over there, power lines, but no security cameras. So even if you do have your location on, or your friends to track or your family to track, they know you're out here on a run, it's still up to you for your own protection. Now, ultimately, to my left is where Laken Riley's body was found. Right here, this is the wooded area that the police reports talk about. This is the gravel spill where all the police tape was roping everything off. There's still remnants of it here. And as you come over here to this rock, you can see some type of vigil, some type of memorial, a couple of flowers, and a smiley face painted here, probably by friends, family, even community members, honoring the loss of life of Laken Riley.
You know, when Cody went out there and is seeing where it is, I mean, it's in the open. This is not like in the middle of the woods, like in the Delphi case. This is out in the open, on a college campus, for goodness sake. Which brings us to our first question in the investigation, which is about our victim, Laken Riley. Was Laken Riley targeted here? Right? Could this have just been like a crime of opportunity? Oh, here's a girl, here's a young woman, let me attack her. Let me take her life, let me see if I can sexually assault her. Like just randomly, or was she targeted? Joining me to try to figure all this out, private investigator with more than 2 decades of experience, Jason Jensen, and forensic death investigator, professor of forensics at Jacksonville State University and the host of the very popular Body Bags podcast, Joseph Scott Morgan. All right, before we have this discussion, I'll give you just a little more information here. This was Jeff Clark, chief of police at UGA, what he said about this very topic.
At this time, the investigation suggests that they had no relationship. He did not know her at all. I think this was a crime of opportunity where he saw an individual and bad things happen.
Okay, Jason Jensen, what are your thoughts about Laken Riley? Was she targeted here? Was it just a chance meeting? Was this someone who went out to commit a crime?
I think to answer that, Vinnie, it's all yes. Yes, she was targeted in the sense it was a crime of opportunity. He was on the prowl. He was looking for a victim, any victim, likely for a victim to commit a sexual assault with. Other than that, there's no connection between him and the victim in this particular case.
Joseph Scott Morgan, how do you, like, we look at this crime scene and it's shocking how wide open everything really is in this area. It's a brazen attack. How much do you think went into the planning, the preparation, or the decision to attack Laken Riley at that time on that trail?
I think some, at least at an elementary level, perhaps. He had been there before, I certainly believe. I'm curious as to how much time the police spent in that overgrowth over there. I think that this was a targeted attack, just like Jason had said. It's targeting a particular demographic, young female that was out alone by herself jogging. And, you know, it's not as open as you might think. When you get away from where her body was deposited, there's a lot of cover for him. And so he had the advantage all the while. And if she had earbuds in, something that was preventing her from hearing anything that would knock down her ability to fully sense that environment and that she's moving around in, yeah, I mean, she's a lamb to slaughter at that point in time, and he's a wolf over in the brush looking to grab her.
Jason Jensen, in trying to, and this was early on in the investigation when the chief made that statement, but is there any way that you could attempt to track whether or not he had been following her or was familiar with her from other runs? Because like in the case out in Idaho with the Idaho students, it seems in that case they were able to figure out that he may have been around that house a bunch of times, maybe scoping it out. What are your thoughts about that part of the investigation?
Yes, we do know that they collected his cell phone so that they could determine what his GPS locations were. That was part of a warrant activity that was early on in this case. And so it would be easy for them to piece if he was ever in the vicinity of her apartment at any point in the weeks preceding to this. One of the things that is interesting is one of the charges that he is facing is being a peeping Tom, which I think goes to show his motive and his frame of mind at the time, because he's, obviously at that point, if he's peeping in the young women's windows, it all is part of a pattern developing here that he's targeting a young female, and at the right moment in time when he found that opportunity, he, took Laken Riley's life.
Joseph Scott Morgan, when he woke up that morning, do you think this was the intention that day to attack? And I'm not saying the murder, I'm saying the intention to attack a young woman on that campus. Do you think he woke up and like, okay, I'm going to do this today?
Yeah, I think that it was. And that goes back to this idea. He was aware of the trail. He was aware of how much cover there was. And, his preparation met opportunity. Now, how prepared he was when he actually showed up, I think a lot of that, we can discuss relative to the type of weapon that he utilized in this case. Tells a lot about what went on. But yeah, I think in his mind, at least at a primal level, he is prepared to do this particular day. I just don't know if he intended to bring about her death.
All right. Jason Jensen, Joseph Scott Morgan with us. All right, coming up next, why would Jose Ibarra want a bench trial?
Do you have any questions about your decision to waive a jury trial in this case?
No questions.
The Court TV podcast will return.
The state was contacted by the defense last week, and they let the state know that they wish to waive the defendant's right to a trial by jury, and instead this defendant wishes to seek a trial by judge only, a bench trial.
Absolutely shocking. To me, the defense notifies the prosecution, say, hey, oh yeah, by the way, that jury we want to select, not going to need it. Let's just have the judge figure this all out. We want a bench trial. Strange development in this case against Jose Ibarra. Take a listen. Here's the judge now speaking through an interpreter to the defendant about this, about waiving the right to have 12 people have to agree to a verdict versus just one sitting on the bench.
Mr. Ibarra, I need to ask you, did you go over the waiver of jury trial and agreement to proceed with the bench trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you understand it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you go over that with your attorney?
Yes, Your Honor.
Was it freely, knowingly, and intelligently signed and considered by you?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you have any questions about your decision to waive a jury trial in this case?
No questions.
Have you had enough time to talk to your lawyers about that?
Yes, Your Honor.
And do you understand that if I grant this request, it cannot be revoked by you going forward?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
Again, extremely unusual. Brings me to my next question. And it's about this decision. Why would Jose Ibarra want a bench trial and waive a jury? Why? With me to help figure this out, criminal defense attorney Josh Schiffer and the criminal defense attorney who represented Melody Farris in the burn pile murder trial, John Luke Weaver. Both of these guys, great Georgia attorneys. This is a Georgia case. Josh Schiffer, why? Why would you do this?
Yeah, there are a number of reasons that you would elect to proceed with a bench trial rather than a jury trial. The first thing that comes to mind is always how inflammatory the evidence would be. And the state can do a very good job inflaming the passions of a jury, especially with something as terrifying as the acts alleged in this case. The state believes very often that by inflaming the passions of the jury, they get more convictions, and the jury will ignore evidence. By choosing a judge-only bench trial, with the state's consent, of course, the defense is hoping that the judge will be able to see past some of these emotions. That, or there could be a specific technical reason that they've selected a bench trial.
John Luke, the other part of this is you just have to convince one, not 12, to prove the case, which I think, what judge, John Luke, would put his or her signature on a not guilty verdict form for this guy accused of this crime? I mean, I just don't see it. I see a waving of the white flag here.
I agree with you. I think it's a complete waving of the white flag. I think that means they've got nothing. There's absolutely no defense they have, and maybe what they're trying to do is they're thinking forward to sentencing, because at the end of the day, if they take less time, if they don't put a jury through all of this for absolutely nothing, maybe the judge says instead of life without parole or attacking in all these years after that, then we're talking about maybe life with the possibility of parole. He's a young guy, so that possibly means he could get out someday, and that could be part of the calculus. Again, I don't know. I would never do it in a case like this, but that's what they've decided to do.
Yeah, and Josh, the same thing, though, goes for sentencing. What judge in Georgia is going to put their name on giving this defendant, under these circumstances, if the case is proven, any chance to ever get out? I mean, the break that he got was the local prosecutor didn't go for the death penalty.
Yeah, and the prosecuting attorney's council of Georgia brought out the big guns with Sheila Ross coming in. She's a ringer. She's an absolute pro. Everybody expects her to present a really strong case. And that would again go into maybe there's some currency you can give to the judge by not putting everybody through a long, laborious trial. There also may again be this outside procedural or specific appellate issue that they're hoping to hone in on. I've seen bench trials move with alarming speed. I've been part of some bench trials that, gone and done in a snap. They just It's that fast. So it is kind of giving up the ghost when it comes to contesting the facts.
Yeah, you don't have to have any sidebars, that's for sure. You don't have to have any objections. The judge say, I'll ignore the stuff that's not admissible, and I'll just base my verdict on the admissible evidence. John Luke, the other part of this is, isn't the best way for a criminal defendant, if they they know they did it, isn't the best way for a criminal defendant to have some opportunity at sentencing to just go into court instead of a bench trial, say, I did it, accept responsibility for your actions, maybe have some explanation or mitigation about what you went through in your life, and then use that? Because you're still going to have a trial here, you know, and that's not accepting responsibility for your actions.
No, I agree with you, Vinny, 100% on that. If you're going to plea. If you're going to have a trial, have a trial. And maybe what happened, there may have been some breakdown in communication between the attorneys insofar as they couldn't completely agree on a straight plea. And so maybe this was just somehow that the attorney worked out with her client that, you know, this is what we got to do to maybe get just the possibility of parole someday.
Yeah, I could see that, Josh. I could see that. Like it's like an extended plea. Instead of going in and doing it in half a day or in a couple hours, we'll do it over a couple of days.
Yeah, it's the long, slow plea, and you're trying to get the judge to maybe open their eyes that the aggression in the state's case is valid and worth, but just, hey, dial it back just a little bit. There might be something to consider before you drop the hammer, because you're right. This is a political state. No judge is going to shy away from using the discretion placed in them. Especially Judge Haggard's not new to this job.
All right, so we got more to get to. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues. I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the murder of Laken Riley. Unfortunately, it's a fact pattern we've seen before. A young woman just simply going for a run in an area that should absolutely be safe, and then is attacked and killed by a predator. Only many believe this alleged predator should have already been locked up. Here's the story.
Laken Riley was a nursing student doing everything right, working hard in school, getting good grades, and preparing for a life of service to others. Her future was bright. One morning while going for a run on the University of Georgia campus, Laken was attacked. She fought back. She tried to call for help, but in the end, she was killed. It was a murder mystery that struck fear on a campus and broke the hearts of all who knew Laken. The investigation was quick, and Jose Ibarra, a man who entered the country illegally and had a history with law enforcement in the United States, was arrested and charged with Laken's murder.
The investigation was very quick in this case, extremely fast. Some of the cases we cover here on Vinnie Politan Investigates, they're still unsolved, or some take weeks, months, sometimes years to solve. Not this one. It's hours and days. They are figuring it out very, very quickly. Take a listen here to Sergeant Timothy Johnson from the Athens-Clarke County Police Department.
Sergeant Chaudhry in the 9th West A Squad proactively went to Argo apartment where an officer found in a recycling dumpster, a cardboard recycling dumpster, found a jacket which had hair on it, and the jacket was torn. They also found some latex gloves with suspected blood in the area to the east, on the east property of the Argo apartment complex. The officer observed a surveillance video belonging to a resident at the apartment complex. Officers made contact with the residents and then called UGA since this was their ongoing investigation. UGA officials arrived and they were able to gather all the evidence, including the surveillance video from the residents. As well, our officers were able to capture an image from the video surveillance of the suspect placing the items in the dumpster.
Everyone was working together very quickly. I mean, it's a big deal, every murder investigation, but when you have one on a campus with students, things seem to build up in intensity and the need to find a killer because you have a whole campus full of young men and young women at risk. So let's get to our next question in this case. What is the evidence against Jose Ibarra? We heard about the dumpster, some of the items retrieved there. Let's talk more about this evidence. With me, private investigator with more than 2 decades of experience, Jason Jensen, and forensic death investigator, host of the very popular Body Bags podcast, Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph Scott Morgan, let me ask you about the jacket and the gloves found in that dumpster. How significant? What are you looking for there?
Well, you know, as far as the gloves go, Vin, I'm curious as to know about what kind of biological samples might be recovered from those gloves. And if you have viable DNA, it's there. Whose DNA is it? Here's another piece to this, Vin, that's is more in your territory, I think, as far as an attorney goes. But one of the things I'm thinking is if you show up to commit an act like this and you're wearing gloves, that gives you this idea of an event of premeditation. You know, we talked about earlier crime of opportunity. I don't know about you, most people don't walk around with latex gloves on. And so that's going to be significant. The sergeant mentioned the hair as well. What kind of biological strings can be pulled there, and, you know, where you can find a specific identity, and what's the nature of that hair? Do you have an entire hair with a root bulb that's there, or is it, you know, going to be a hair shaft that's broken off? And was this a hair that had come apart as a result of some kind of traumatic event, or was it just kind of a natural sloughing?
Let's take a listen to Sergeant Joshua Epps from the University of Georgia Police Department.
When the person who you've identified as Jose Ibarra, the defendant, when you asked him to get up and he came out, did you observe anything about this person?
Yes, he resembled the individual I see in this photo more so than Diego.
When you say in this photo, be specific for the record, which photo?
The dumpster photo that I was provided that morning.
What injuries did you observe to Jose Ibarra?
More so what I identified as potential defensive wounds. He had scratches on his forearms, his bicep. I believe it was his left wrist. On the inside of his wrist, there was a puncture mark consistent with the width of a fingernail.
Did you notice anything on his face?
His face, his lip looked a little bruised on the lower lip, and his forehead looked very red or irritated.
Jason Jensen, listening to this officer testify, this is important stuff. So they have a surveillance video by the dumpster, much like in the Jen Soto, Stephen Stearns case. And it's a little bit grainy, and they go and they execute a search warrant at Diego Ibarra's apartment, his brother. But then when they get there, they see Jose, and he makes all these observations. I mean, this is important stuff, trying to figure out if it's one brother or the other.
Yes. In fact, given the fact that he's got defensive wounds, and we do know from the execution of the warrant, they collected DNA samples from him. Now, if they can tie the DNA to, let's say, epithelial skin cells that were collected from underneath her nails because of the nature of defensive wounds, then we tie the suspect directly to the deceased victim. So it's very critical and very likely that that's the type of evidence that's going to come forward at this bench trial.
Let's take a listen now to Detective Tim Stewart from the Athens-Clarke County PD.
Did you pull the known prints of a Jose Antonio Ibarra?
Yes,
Did you compare those to the latent print?
I did.
What were your results?
In my opinion, the left thumb of Jose Antonio Ibarra is the source of the latent on the cell phone.
Okay, Joseph Scott Morgan, we've got some conflicting things going on here right now, right? We've got a fingerprint on Laken Riley's cell phone matching to the defendant, Jose Ibarra. Then we were talking about those latex gloves. I'm trying to figure out what happened here.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating, Vin? At what point in time did those gloves perhaps come off of his hand? And the fact that we've got a latent print that comes off the phone, everybody can identify with this. You've got this non-porous surface here on the glass surface of the smartphone. When you touch that surface, the fatty lipids that are coming through your skin, through the friction ridges, are going to leave a very distinctive print. And in this case, what he's talking about is a thumbprint. Remember, we've got this kind of really gut-wrenching moment where this 911 call has been initiated, and suddenly it just drops off. And what the investigators are saying is that he had essentially knocked the phone out of her hand at that point. The critical thing, though, is where were those gloves at that particular time? Had they gotten so messy that he had taken them off for some reason, or did he put the gloves on afterwards, after he had subdued her?
Yeah, I mean, Laken Riley is fighting for her life, doing everything right, calling 911. She knows something is wrong here, and the suspect allegedly hangs up that call. Let's take a listen to Sergeant Joshua Epps again from the UGA PD.
There was a call for a suspicious person. Initially, it sounded like a peeping Tom looking through the back window of an apartment at Rogers Road, which is the university housing complex adjacent to this apartment complex. The individual is described as a male with a hooded sweatshirt on that was dark in color, with dark pants, and a white cup, like a fast food restaurant cup, who was trying to get in the front door and also walk to the back, looking in the back window of an apartment complex.
Approximately how much time passed from when the student called 911 until the time that you located Laken Riley's body?
Maybe 2 hours or so.
Okay, Jason Jensen, this is significant as well. They're saying peeping Tom here, but it seems like there was more on the suspect's mind, if we believe this evidence, that he's trying to gain entry into someone else's apartment while peering through the window.
Exactly right. If what they're saying is true, that he tried to gain access into the apartment, that means that he was trying to target that particular occupant of that apartment initially, and when that failed to occur, he goes off to the next opportunity.
Joseph Scott Morgan, how would you evaluate, from what we know and what's been made public, more will happen during the trial, obviously, but the strength of the evidence in this case against this defendant?
Oh, my gosh. The physical evidence in this case, I think, is going to be overwhelming, Vin. I truly do. I think that there's a lot more here than we probably know, and particularly when we start to dig into that kind of granular detail that we'll hear on the stand from particularly DNA scientists and from the forensic pathologist. It's going to be, it'll be dramatic, and you'll see specific physical tiebacks if I'm reading this correctly, because they've already revealed quite a bit. How many cases have you and I covered over the years, Vin, where we don't have this much information that's come out at this point, this early? I mean, think about this. This didn't happen that long ago, and we've already got all of this data. How much more is left to be revealed?
Yeah, Jason Jensen, when you think about the nature of the evidence in this case, it's the kind of evidence that jurors like. It's a physical evidence, it's a thumbprint, it's potentially DNA, it's a video. This is the stuff that can really resonate with a jury, but in this case, there's not even going to be a jury. There's just a jury of one, the judge.
No, exactly. I mean, we know from the CSI effect that really what jurors like to see is the scientific evidence, and it seems like in this particular case, like Joseph Scott Morgan was just saying, it's going to be overwhelming. We have everything from cellular, DNA, fingerprints, you name it. It's not just one piece of evidence, it's a multitude of evidence.
Jason Jensen, Joseph Scott Morgan, thank you so much for your insight and expertise. Now, despite all the evidence, he's got a defense still to come. What is Jose Ibarra's alibi?
The photo that I saw, the individual's looking away. I can't see the consistency facial hair on the front of him. I can't see definitively where the tattoos are. So yes, that's well, I guess what I'm trying to get at that point in my report is that we have knowledge there's other individuals inside that could have also been wearing the hat.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
I observed Sergeant Johnson met me out front of apartment Delta or D126. He had a Hispanic individual detained. He informed me that he found this individual who presented a fake green card to him when he encountered him.
Did you observe that individual?
Yes.
And what did you observe that individual to be wearing?
He had a black hat on and a red quarter-zip athletic style sweatshirt with sweatpants. The hat was significant because it matched a photo that Sergeant Johnson provided me of a male that was discarding evidence within 24 hours of the murder of Laken Riley in the adjacent area.
The person was he later identified as Diego Ibarra?
Correct.
Interesting part of this case, and I think it may loom large, is that there's this distinctive hat that they see on the suspect in the video. But then when they go to the apartment, Jose Ibarra is not wearing the hat. His brother Diego is actually wearing the hat. I want to put something up on the screen here. This is pretty interesting. This is from something that the state filed. The state further requests that the defendant serve upon the prosecuting attorney a written notice of the defendant's intent to offer a defensive alibi. Does he have an alibi? Is he going to say, I wasn't there? Couldn't have been me. I was somewhere else doing something else? Maybe his alibi. So that brings us to our next question, right? Relative to the alibi, if and when there is one here, what is Jose Ibarra's alibi? I mean, this is the type of case, right? Like if you didn't do it, it means you weren't there. It means you're somewhere else, right? And that would be reasonable doubt or proof of your innocence. Either way. Let's bring back in our guest still with us to discuss all of this. Criminal defense attorney Josh Schiffer and the criminal defense attorney who represented Melody Farris in the burn pile murder trial that you saw here on Court TV, John Luke Weaver, is with us. Both great Georgia defense attorneys. I'm wondering here, John Luke, if this is going to turn into a situation, and let me play this out for you. You tell me if this could possibly happen, that Diego Ibarra comes into the courtroom and says, I did it. I did it. I was wearing that hat because I did it. And it wasn't my brother. Is that possible? I mean, what would happen if Diego came into court and said, I did it?
Well, that's never going to happen, Vinny. But I tell you what, if I had an alibi, the first thing I would do is send notice of alibi to the DA immediately. I want them to know. I want to scream it from the mountaintops. I've got an alibi. You've got the wrong man. But that's not going to happen. 0% chance.
0%. Josh Schiffer, your thoughts? I mean, if you, in like a murder mystery, which this was for, you know, a few hours at least, if you didn't do it, you would have evidence of where you are because we know the time of the attack. We know the time, the general time of the death. If you didn't do it, you would obviously be somewhere else.
Yeah, and the brother Diego and the ID issue, that got hunted down real quick because, you know, neither of these gentlemen have scot-free backgrounds. That was part of the investigation, is how well known these guys are. And yeah, you could have a mistake of fact. All kinds of wild stuff could happen. This is Georgia. This is bench trial. If you're going to swing for the fences, this is kind of spot to do it because Mr. Ibarra looks like he was up against a DA who wasn't going to even talk about dealing about or with life without parole. I think that's really the only thing that was negotiated in the disposition of this case. State's got firm ground to stand on it. Miss Ross isn't going to, you know, back down. She would be subject to some sort of criticism for offering parole. That's not what the state does here in Georgia. We go for the max.
No, we didn't go for the max here. The max was a death penalty. Let's be honest now, Josh. Don't say max. The max was a death penalty in this case.
And that would have been improper for a number of reasons. The call was made early on about death penalty issues in this case. It's part of why we are getting justice in 6 months. You want to talk about the efficiency of justice. If you make this a death penalty case, you may as well add 1, 2, 3, 5, 7 years on it. By making this an efficient prosecution, the state gets to do a victory lap, assuming they get a conviction. Now, the defense may have something awesome. I hope they do. I'm a born, dyed-in-the-wool defense lawyer. I want to see what they've got to bring, and I hope it's something good. Otherwise, this is the long, slow plea we talked about.
Yeah, John Luke, I'm looking at the case, do you think they point the finger at Diego? Like, that's the only thing I can think of that they could potentially do. I mean, you got to explain the fingerprint on her phone. My guess is there's going to be DNA. Brothers have similar DNA, but they don't have the same DNA.
I mean, I think we know I would. But at the end of the day, I think that's maybe all he's got. I mean, you've ID'd the wrong person at the very least, but it sounds like, from what little I know about it, going back looking through the record, I think he's sunk. I just don't think there's going to be any way around this with the physical evidence. There's just nothing to point towards an actual person anywhere.
So, Josh, does he testify, or in the alternative, if he is convicted, does he give a statement at any point of this? Will he ever talk about this? Will he ever say anything about what happened that day?
It depends on what his opportunity for mitigation is. You've got mitigation in the face of a likely conviction. Then you've got mitigation when it comes to sentencing. And mitigation when you're facing really hard facts is more important than contestation. Mitigation is opening up Judge Haggard's eyes and trying to get him somehow to say, all right, this is one of the most horrible things that's ever been delivered to your plate. You're a lifetime Superior Court judge. He's been on the bench forever in a small community. He is well known. He is not someone that's just going to give a light touch unless you can really open his eyes. And that's assuming that there's something to open their eyes to. You know me, Vinny. You've known me for years. I'm a bleeding guy as much as anybody. This is the kind of case that terrifies everyone. Stranger upon stranger, crime of opportunity, sexual violence of a young person who had nothing but innocence in this world.
Josh Schiffer, John Luke Weaver, great to have your insight. Thank you both so much. Now, from the moment he stepped into this country, this alleged killer has had issues with the law, from allegations of assaulting a Border Patrol agent, reckless endangerment of a child in New York, and now 10 more charges, including murder in Georgia, all in less than a year. And now, with a bench trial looming, chances are the only crimes he'll be able to commit in the future will be from behind bars. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for the answers as the investigation continues. There you have it. If you want to see more in-depth reporting on the latest true crime stories, you can see me every weeknight, 8 p.m. Eastern on Closing Arguments. Thank you so much for downloading. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.